Should James Bond be a woman? What would be the point of it? What would be the sake of it? What would it bring? What are the benefits? And what would it do? Let's discuss. Cameron Kelly Smith, movies and wrestling. Let's go. Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Cameron Kelly Smith. Be sure to hit that subscribe and notification button to stay tuned on the content I produce each and every week in the world of wrestling and movie related discussions. So, should James Bond be played by a woman? This has been a huge topic of conversation. It's just been brought up again recently with Piers Brosnan, former 007 James Bond himself, saying that, that men should make way and that a woman should now be played by James Bond. So let's really discuss this because this is something that has really intrigued me. Let me just say this, I'm a huge James Bond fan, specifically the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. Absolutely love them. Casino Royale is one of my favorite movies ever. James Bond, Daniel Craig, his Casino Royale. Love it. Big fan. But the question of whether James Bond should be a woman has been discussed a lot, and I'm intrigued as to why. Why should James Bond be a woman? What is the argument? Now, I would argue that for people who believe James Bond should be a woman, there are some who will say that, him being a woman represents a change of being played by a woman would represent a change and a continuation of where the industry is going, giving more women opportunities within Hollywood to play big, iconic roles previously dominated by their male counterparts, and that this would represent a shift and give a positive message to Hollywood and to the industry in general. That is one argument. There is then others that say that James Bond is outdated, that he is a figure of his time and not our current time where society is right now. And as a result, we should have a woman in there to play the role of James Bond that would more so be representative of the current times that we live in. And then you get the others that will just argue James Bond should be a woman because James Bond should be a woman. It sounds good. I'm behind it. I want to come across as if I'm here for the movement and that it would just be great. But let's actually boil it down. So let's take the first argument in regards to opening up more opportunities for women in Hollywood. I'm all for that. Women should have just as equal opportunities in Hollywood as men. They should be getting big roles. Big roles should be written for them. However, that is also an issue with writers. Writers have a responsibility when they are writing new work to be able to say to themselves, okay, let me get out my preconceived notions. Let me get rid of what I'm used to seeing and have a go at writing a female character. Now, as a writer myself, I've tried to write female characters and it's not hard. It's not. Some people may think that as a man, you're not really going to be able to understand how a woman may feel or how she may come across, but it's not that difficult. And so I think it is the job of writers within Hollywood, and studios to write roles for women that can become iconic and stand the test of time. My first example being Rey from Star Wars. I love Rey. I love her to bits. I'm such a big fan of that character, and she's now an iconic character that will stand the test of time. But she is a good example of in my opinion, of a strong female originally written character that is headlining a franchise, arguably one of the, if not the biggest franchise of all time in Star Wars. And so that can be done. James Bond is a different beast. And the reason why I believe James Bond is a different beast is because, okay, let's take the fact of when he was written. He was written in the 50s by Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming was known to be someone who was a bit of a womanizer. He had some of his own, views in terms of homosexuality, racism, and whatnot. He was somebody who was a military man. He lived in a different time period. Men were very different back then. He based the character on people who he had worked with, people who he had seen in the military. That is a character of that time. But I wouldn't argue, I would argue that still isn't relevant now. Phoebe WallerBridge, who is the writer of the 25th Bond movie that's soon to come out next year, she did a interview with Deadline like a month or so ago where she basically said that, that James Bond is still relevant now. The idea that he's not is complete bollocks, and that all, I'm paraphrasing here, but she basically argued that instead of trying to make Bond, just new and be reflective of this new time that we live in, why don't we just have it be where he is confronted about these new ideas, these new norms, the way that our society is moving, and have him confront that? Isn't that a more compelling story? I mean, let's say we have a woman as James Bond. So what would it be? Would it be a woman playing James Bond who is essentially still that character? Someone who would maybe manipulate men or be a bit of a, I don't know if manizer is a word, but the opposite to a womanizer. Would she still keep that same character? Or would you want a female James Bond to be reflective of where a lot of people believe that our society is going? Someone who is, reflective of the society that we live in now. Because if you did that, there's going to be two things. One is that it wouldn't be James Bond. And two, isn't that less compelling? Isn't it more compelling to be able to watch a James Bond movie with a man playing 007, well, James Bond specifically, not 007, a man playing James Bond, and have him confront the issues, the ideals that he has, and bring them up in the movie, and have Bond confront this shift, this change of society? Isn't that a more compelling story? Because the fact of the matter is that I know that there are a lot of women who have watched the James Bond movies or franchise and have not gravitated towards it or not agreed with it because of how, especially, James Bond's attitude and the way he treats women. I completely get that. But let's take the example of the news of Leshawna Lynch, who was cast as the new 007. Not James Bond, the new 007. So in Bond 25, from what we understand, James Bond is retired, I believe. He's in Jamaica. He's chilling out on the beach. So imagine if Leshawna Lynch, James Bond has to come back into service. He has to come out of retirement. And he's confronted by this agent who now holds his prior mantle, the 007 mantle. And imagine if she's, which she is, Leshawna Lynch, but the character is a badass, young, black, strong female who takes no bollocks, no crap. And imagine if that character, which I believe they will probably do, can go up against Bond and challenge him, but not only challenge him, but say to him, listen, what you do with other people will not work on me, and I'm a badass in my field and I'm going to get the job done. Isn't that more compelling? Wouldn't you be more intrigued for that to happen and have her potentially, if they wanted to, spin off and do some kind of spin-off series later on down the line if you wanted to? Or let's even say you wanted to go down another route, which has been suggested, as in James Bond having a sister or James Bond having a daughter. Same thing. I think that is slightly more compelling. Not all for it, however. But if they would do it, I think that's more interesting if he had a sister or a daughter and the views that he holds against women he's now having to confront because he doesn't want his sister or daughter to be treated in that way. I think that's more of a compelling story showing the growth of a character rather than just a woman taking on that mantle. Now, with the character of James Bond himself, as I said, he is a product of his time. But with the current iteration of James Bond, that being done by Daniel Craig, I would argue that it's not the same as previous Bond movies. There is scenes in these movies where James Bond women do confront him about who he is as a person and how he acts. We have seen James Bond fall in love, Daniel Craig's James Bond. It's not the same as once was told. It has made some improvements. And so once again, I go back to the argument of why would you want James Bond to be a woman? What does it actually do? And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway. If your argument is that you feel that James Bond being a woman is that it's going to open up more opportunities in Hollywood and that it's going to essentially be a statement being made to the entire world and the industry saying that this is the movement we're going on, I get that. But I think you run the risk of having that movie come out where James Bond is being played by a woman, let's say Jamie Bond, or if there are any women in the world named James, let's say we do that. But then what then? What then? When that movie comes out and we have that initial shock of James Bond is being played by a woman, what then? Who would that character be? If you kept the same essence of the James Bond character, you're still faced with the same issue. I think it's much more intriguing, personally speaking, to have James Bond continue being a man and have him come into this society and be confronted, be challenged, let him grow, let him make his own decisions, because there are people like James Bond there are people like Ian Fleming in the 50s and people who the character of James Bond is based on, there are people who are like that. There is. There's no point hiding it. There's no point covering it up. Some people find it cool. Some people hate it. Some people in between. But I think it's more of a compelling story to have that be brought in. Now, obviously, as well, the other big issue, well, not issue, but the argument being made is if James Bond should be played by someone of another ethnicity. I'm all for this. I would love Idris Elba to be played by Bond. And I think that even if you had another man of a different ethnic background playing Bond, you don't have to shove the thing down your throats of, he's of a different ethnicity, and so we need to bring that in. You don't even necessarily need to do that either. But my argument is that I think sometimes it's okay the way things are. I think sometimes it is okay. And specifically with Bond, if this is another character, you know, Ghostbusters in general, like that reboot, I think it's completely fine for all those characters to be women. There's other examples as well. But James Bond, that character, all those ideals, how he views the world, that makes him him, and it makes it interesting. And I think it's much more of a compelling story to have him come into this new movie and be challenged. Let's see what Phoebe WallerBridge does, because I think that it's in good hands. I think that she's gonna bring that to light in this movie and have him be confronted by these issues that a lot of us see and argue against Bond and that character. So let that happen. As I said, I'm super excited for Bond 25. I'm going to be there opening night. I cannot wait. But for those who are arguing that James Bond should be a woman, just take a moment and I would like to know even myself, if for someone to educate me and tell me why. What would it actually do from a character perspective? And is it just simply for a statement? Because if so, I think that statement can be made by writing new, iconic, strong female characters that will stand the test of time. And as I said, I think Leshawna Lynch as a new 007, she's going to be a badass. She's going to be great. She's a great actress. And I think that she's going to bring a lot, and it's going to be a very interesting story. But guys, let me know what you think. Do you think that James Bond should be played by a woman? Let me know. Jump down in the comment section below. Give me your thoughts. It's been a really interesting discussion, a big topic of debate. Thank you for checking out my channel, guys. If you like what you see here, hit that subscribe and notification button. Jump down in the comment section below and give me a fat, big old like if you like what you see here. Thank you for checking out my video, guys. Have a good day.